Hey y'all, it's Mary Hyatt, life coach, business consultant, Kundalini yoga, meditation and breathwork teacher, certified conversational hypnotherapist, and top leader with doTERRA essential oils. Welcome to season 3 of the Living Fully Alive podcast. Now we're doing things a little differently this time. This season is an 8-part mini-series called Feel to Heal. And we will be taking a deep dive into all things feelings and emotions. How we respond to what we feel inside ourselves impacts our work, our relationships, our health, our spiritual lives, and everything in between. And when we don't have the skills to properly feel and process our emotions, our repressed anger, shame, resentment, fear, grief, and loneliness ends up driving the bus and hijacking our lives. But I want to show you a better way towards emotional resilience, freedom, and healing. Rest assured, I am still here to guide you on the path of inner transformation and empower you to come back into alignment with your soul, trust your inner voice, and design a life that makes your heart sing. So, let's jump into it. It is Mary, and here we are, season 3. I am so freaking excited. I have had the best 2-month hiatus, I have to say. Yes, I missed you guys, but boy, did I need those 2 months off to recalibrate, to recharge, to just give myself a little perspective on how I wanted to move forward with the podcast. I did 90 episodes in season 2. That is a lot of episodes. So I have done some deep soul work, as always, and have decided to take a different approach to this season. And this season, I really want to slow down, be intentional about the episodes that I'm creating in a way that deep dives into one particular topic. This season, we're getting into emotions, we're getting into feelings, and to me, there could be nothing more important than that right now, because it's always been important, but there's a lot of big feelings happening right now in the world. In fact, if you go online at all, which I'm sure most of you do, if you're on Facebook, if you're on Instagram, I don't do TikToks, I don't know what's happening there, but there are some big emotions. People are feeling a lot of certain ways. It is coming out sideways in every which way. And people are losing their damn minds, and they don't know how to control themselves. They don't know how to manage their emotions. And it's just this giant, the image that comes to my mind is just like emotional vomit, and that, isn't enjoyable to be the consumer of. I don't know if any of you guys, I'm sure, like myself, have had heightened anxiety and stress just consuming the media. But ultimately, for us as individuals, it doesn't feel good when we feel out of control of our emotions. And so I really wanted to give you the tools to actually know how to regulate your own emotions, your own nervous system, how you express emotions, how you communicate emotions, how you process through them, so that you feel like you have a sense of emotional intelligence, inner resilience, and the ability to move through this particular season of life, and hopefully for the rest of your life, with a little bit more awareness and grace. And so that's what we're going to be getting into on season 3. And we are going to start from the basics today. And we're going to go through 8 episodes. The other part of this is that I'm slowing down to do 8 episodes for this season. And because I did so many episodes, 90 episodes last season, I was like, I think it would be really nice for that concept of less is more to be the kind of deciding factor in the choices that I make for my business. Because the truth is, I know that I'm not alone in saying that there's a lot of consumption fatigue, whether that's having to get on Zoom calls, whether that's just consuming the news or social media. I think we're all a little bit exhausted. So more is not more in this case, less is more. So we're going to have deeper conversations. We're going to have more intimate conversations. And that starts today. And then I'm going to sprinkle in a few guided meditations to help everybody integrate also what it is that we're talking about on the season of the podcast. So I'm really pumped about it. I'm really pumped about it. And today is I was like day one, but it's episode one of the third season. And we're going to be talking about the basics of emotions. And so for me, I can remember before I had this level of awareness, before I was a life coach, before I did this work to help people get back in touch with their bodies, their emotions, their spirits, their desires, their femininity, I was numb, like asleep to the world, dead to the world. I was numb and I wanted to be numb. Like I literally did not want to feel. I did my best to escape reality, feeling anything that was actually happening in my real life. It all felt just too painful, too overwhelming, too intense. And I didn't know what to do with what was happening. And so I numbed, I coped, I stuffed, I denied, I avoided. And I think unconsciously that felt more safe because I did not trust myself with my emotions. Like I can remember the few times that I would feel, it was like my emotions would erupt out of nowhere and catch me off guard. And I was like, oh my God, I don't know what to do. Like I would be watching a movie, let's say, and all of a sudden I would start crying. And I'm like, okay, I know this is fantasy. I know this has nothing to do with my life. Obviously, something is getting triggered. I don't even think I knew of the concept of getting triggered, but clearly that's what was going on. But I would like cry and bawl my eyes out. Even after the credits had rolled and the movie was done, I'd still be like having an emotional experience. And I didn't know what to make of that. I certainly didn't know what to do about it. And I was like, what is wrong? And then, of course, I would go and bury that even deeper. Or I would be, this is when I was early on in my marriage, I would just, we'd be in a disagreement with my now ex-husband, and I would be so angry and all this emotion would come up, all this resentment, and I would erupt. And I would get so heated that I would literally have to like storm out of the house, get in my car, go take a drive just to calm down. I was also dealing with panic attacks. And so they would just seem to come out of nowhere. I couldn't make sense of why I was having a panic attack. It didn't seem like it really related to my life. And yet here I was. If you've ever experienced one, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It feels like you're dying. It is literally the worst feeling in the world. And just feeling so helpless, feeling like this overwhelming sense of emotions. And I had no clue what to do with it. So my job became about managing these emotions. And anytime they would pop up just a little bit, it would be like the whack-a-mole, you know, like go down, baby, go down, you know, whack them, whack them, whack them, whack them, because I was not going to let those surface. I was not going to let myself feel. And I did all kinds of things to stop feeling, whether that was drinking, whether that was eating, whether that was staying super busy. I mean, I became a master at avoiding my feelings. And I think that kind of relationship to emotions is really normal and really common. Like even now in the midst of collective trauma, total uncertainty, upheaval, it is surprising to me how many people that I talk to that have no idea how they feel going through this season of life that is pretty crazy. And the majority of people I talk to, unless they've been doing a lot of this work or, you know, I'm working with them one-on-one as a coaching client, they're pretty detached from their emotions and they write them off and they say, oh, you know, it's fine. I'm fine. You know, a lot of people have it worse than me, or, you know, well, you know, at least it's not as bad as so-and-so, you know, I'm doing all right. And yet when you slow it down and you really, for me, when I really start having these conversations with people, it's like, there is sadness. There is fear. There is grief. There's loneliness. Like, oh my gosh, who has been lonely at some point over the past 2 years. I've had a lot of those moments for various reasons. There is anger, there is hurt, and yet we're sort of walking around numbed out, whether we're Netflixing or scrolling or drinking or distracting or whatever it is that we do, overworking to distract ourselves from our feeling. We actually do have really big feelings, but we don't know what to do with them. And especially if you're a woman, there from early ages have been messages to us to not be emotional, to not be too emotional, not to be too PMSy, even too strong. Like I think about emotions that women are not supposed to feel. Anger is a big one of them. Women who are angry are bitchy. I mean, there's so many messages that we get for women to be in control of our emotions, to smile, to say yes, even when we want to say no. Otherwise, we're going to be those women that are, out of control and whatever. And I think that is somewhat changing. I mean, I hope that like this generation or there's a lot more emphasis on cultivating our relationship with emotions. But for our generations and certainly past generations, that was not part of what we learned to develop inside of ourselves. So here's the problem. When we disassociate from our feelings, it can work in the short term. Like sometimes we do, we need to put our feelings on ice. We need to take a break and then we can come back to process them. But we've got to be able to come back and process them in a healthy way in order to live a life where we are truly fully alive. It requires that we befriend our emotions instead of fear them. And I feel like one of the first ways that we can do that is really understand what emotions are. I think a lot of the fear comes from the unknown. And I know that for a lot of people, they are terrified of their emotions. They're terrified of what they're going to find below the surface. And that there's an irrational fear that their emotions will kill them again, that they're going to end up in the loony bin, or that it will somehow, if they start feeling what they're actually feeling and get honest about it, that it's going to like blow up their lives. And I want to like take all that away and really have an honest conversation about it. And you'll realize they're not really as scary as maybe the subconscious mind thinks. And so for a long time, maybe you haven't had a relationship with your emotions. Maybe you haven't let yourself feel your emotions for a long time. Maybe you aren't familiar with them. Maybe you don't have the vocabulary to express them. And so we're going to get to explore all of that in this season so that feelings become more neutral versus good or bad. And so I want you to think about in your life, maybe where you have been numbing, where you have been denying, suppressing, burying how you're feeling. Like if I were to say, if I gave you permission to admit how you're really feeling, how do you feel? How do you feel? Like take a moment and think about that for a second. How do you feel? What's below the surface right here, right now? If there was no judgment about it, if there was no need to fix it or change it or criticize it or wish it or hope it away, but if you could just sort of be with what's here, what are you feeling? And over the course of these 8 episodes, we're going to do work around that at an even deeper level. Tara Brach, who's one of my favorite mindfulness teachers, she says, when an emotion feels too intense and when we don't want to integrate because the pain is too strong, we end up shutting down and avoiding and numbing and disassociating. We ultimately, y'all, we disconnect from our bodies, from our heart, from our emotions, from our intuition. So I want to help you understand what emotions are, because it's a big question mark, I think, a lot of times. So let's get into the definition of emotions. Hey there, real quick. If you are at all feeling extra overwhelmed or exhausted by social media, or simply don't have energy to read through any more emails, believe me, I get it. That's why I want to invite you to connect with me over text. I send out weekly affirmations, words of encouragement, meditations, and of course, you'll be the first to know about any upcoming events or when I publish a new podcast episode. Plus, it's really me, so it's super easy. Just text 615-930-3522 or go to maryhyatt.com/text. maryhyatt.com/text. All right, back to our podcast episode. So I'm going to go check out good old Wikipedia first, nice little Google search. And let's see, of course, there's like a million terrible definitions, right? So this is the one that I landed on. And it says, emotion is a mental state associated with the nervous system brought on by chemical changes variously associated with thoughts, feelings, behavioral responses, and a degree of pleasure or displeasure. There is currently no scientific consensus on a definition. Well, thanks, Google. That was awesome. But this is why I think emotions feel so elusive. Very rarely do we think about the science or the biology when we think about emotions. And so today we're going to explore the anatomy of emotions. And just when we think about how we're feeling, I would say that most people don't know why they're experiencing an emotion or a feeling. And I think, if you've been to therapy, you maybe have an idea that certain events might produce certain emotions. Like, every time you go to, I don't know, a family gathering, you feel anxious, or every time you think about your future, that sparks fear, right? And oftentimes when we think about our past, we have really strong associations and feelings towards our past. Maybe grief over somebody passing, years ago, anger towards a parent for something that happened in childhood, for example. But let's look at what are emotions really. So I want to give you kind of my four-part definition of emotions. Number one, the first part is that emotions are residual chemical records of the past. Emotions are residual chemical records of the past. The body, this is so crazy to me, the body does not know the difference between the original event that created the emotional stress response in the first place and the memory of the event. The chemical response in your body is the same today as when it happened. And it's like it's happening all over again. The memory of the emotion makes you feel like you're reliving the past all over again. And your body thinks it is too. It sends out, get this, this is like the biology part of this. It sends out stress hormones, activates the sympathetic nervous system. So that fight or flight response. It stresses the immune system. And it can throw you into, again, that survival response, that hyperactive, ready, alert response. And so what most of us feel when we think about, okay, how am I feeling right now? What we're actually experiencing is a well-rehearsed memory of an emotion. We're experiencing the memory of the emotion. The chemistry in our bodies gets triggered by a thought. I think about something, maybe I have an experience with a familiar smell, or I'm in a familiar environment. All of a sudden, it lights up the parts of my brain. It fires that same chemistry, and that is hardwired in my brain. And I'm having that old emotional memory. And the more that you replay old events that are really strong in your memory, or the more times that you get triggered, it's like rewiring that stronger and stronger in the chemistry of your brain and creating a stronger neurological pathway. And Dr. Joe Dispenza says emotions are the chemical consequences or feedback of past experiences. As our senses record incoming information from our environment, clusters of neurons organize into networks. And when they freeze into a pattern, your brain makes a chemical that then sends it throughout the body. And that chemical is called an emotion. Is that crazy? Like it's a chemical response. So we can remember certain events that have a stronger emotional charge. We can remember them better when we remember how we feel or how we felt at that time. Like think about all the things that have happened in your past that you like don't think about, you don't remember, that aren't important. There was not an emotional charge to them. The things that we remember are the things that are emotionally charged, whether that's positive, whether that's negative. We are going to remember them stronger when that emotional firing and wiring is stronger, when there's a bigger cluster of neurons happening. And so that stronger the emotional quotient of the event, either good or bad, the stronger the change is going to be in our internal chemistry. So let me break this down a little bit and explain this in a more tangible way. Okay. So during, let me just say this. When I do my like live in-person workshops, whatever those may be, I often do an exercise where I have my audience take a moment to learn how to feel their emotions. We get to practice this in real time. So we start with an unpleasant emotion, like let's say anxiety. And I ask them to think about whatever they need to think about that would conjure up and allow themselves to feel anxious right now. Like if I told you, hey, take a moment, conjure up some old memories, past records of anxiety producing moments, and do that until it produces anxiety for you right now. What's crazy is that within a matter of seconds, they are experiencing that anxiety. Like it does not take long at all for them to reference something in their past that triggers their brain, that sends out all those chemical responses in the body. And they're having a physiological response that we call an emotion, which is really a record of the past. And then I have them do that for another emotion. And this time I might have them think about something maybe a little more positive, take them out of that anxiety and think about maybe peace or gratitude, and just to think about something that they're maybe grateful for and to recount how many blessings that they feel in their lives. And they actually feel gratitude. It's like this mental rehearsal produces that familiar hardwired chemical response in the body that triggers that memorized, learned emotional response. The thought or the memory of an experience activates that chemistry of the emotion. So that results in a person having a feeling a certain way. And this is what actors do all the time. Like think about if you have to play a part in a musical or a movie or a play, and how do you actually get into that emotional state? Like you're pretending, right? And a lot of these times, these emotions, like you think about your favorite actor or actress, I mean, they're like crying on set. They are having these moments where they're really angry on set, and they have to reference in their own mind, in their own memory, a time where they had that similar experience and bring that into the present. And they're pretending, but their biology doesn't know that they're pretending. The biology doesn't know they're playing a part. That's a real experience that they're having physiologically at that time. And the longer you hold on to an emotion, the more impact it has on the body. The total duration of an emotion from start to finish is 90 seconds. 90 seconds, like done, y'all. But the more we ruminate on it, the more we think about it, the more we amp it up, the more we start looking for proof to make it even stronger. It lasts longer and longer. But physiologically, the time it takes for our heart to race or for us to sweat and for our blood pressure to come down is 90 seconds. So the amazing thing about this is when you recognize this, you suddenly realize that you have power over generating new emotions by shifting your thoughts. And we'll talk about that in a later episode. But it's almost like you have access to design your emotional experience through life. Like up until now, you've been doing it unconsciously. You've been rehearsing these memories of the past that conjure up these emotional responses. And if you know that it works that way, you can do it for your future as well, resulting in a very liberating way of existing with your future, with your life, so that you're not just the victim of sort of feeling all these things that you didn't even know are produced by old thinking, old memories, all that kind of stuff. So that's the first part of my definition. Are you still with me? Are you still good? I know this is like, I told you, we're going deep. We are slowing down because this is, again, like stuff that most people aren't taught. So the second part of the definition of emotions are that emotions are vibrations in the body. And this is honestly probably, to me, one of the most liberating parts of this definition. They're just vibrations. They're a frequency. So, for example, when you think about the physiological response to the chemistry being produced in the body, for example, you'll see that emotions are a response to a sensation or change in the body. So, for example, fear. Okay, the emotion of fear. What does that feel like in the body? Okay, it feels like your heart racing, your breathing shortens, maybe your chest tightens, maybe your cortisol spikes, your perspiration increases. As John Bradshaw would say, emotions are energy in motion. If they are not expressed, the energy is repressed. Or Tara Brach, she would say it this way. She would say, all our reactions, get this, all our reactions to people, to situations, to thoughts in our mind are actually reactions to the kind of sensations that are arising within the body. So it's happening as a vibration, as a sensation in the body. So what I love about this is that it brings us to the third part of our definition of emotion, which is emotions are not your identity. They are something that you experience. They are not who you are. There's something you're experiencing. And what I like about this is it gives us a little bit of distance between what we're feeling and who we are. Like I might be experiencing some anxiety, the vibration, the frequency of anxiety running and coursing through my body. But this isn't like my stuck state. This isn't my identity. I am not an anxious person. I'm experiencing anxiety. Or it might be more accurate to say that I am feeling happiness rather than I am happy. Happiness is a moment in time, a experience of that vibration. So they're just emotions. They don't describe who you are. They aren't a label that gets attached to you that's immutable, fixed, and a sentence to your life. Like a lot of people say, well, I have anxiety, I have depression. Well, that's not actually who you are. Yes, that may be part of the chemistry of your body, but we can change the chemistry. We can change the neurological pathways in our brain. So it's not a sentence. It is a current chemical response in the brain. It's a vibration. It's a frequency. And every emotion has a different frequency. And you can literally measure this in hertz. Like the lowest frequency emotion is lust. And as you move up in frequency of emotions, as you get higher and higher, you're looking at gratitude, you're looking at appreciation, you're looking at joy. You know, those are really high vibe, quote unquote, high vibe emotions. It's a higher vibration that you can literally measure, which is really interesting. Okay. So what I like about this, again, is that your emotions are detached from you. These experiences are part of our story, but they do not define us unless we interpret it as who we are and attach ourselves to it. And so my hope is that through this podcast, you have an opportunity to look at what kind of control do I have over managing my emotional states? Like, where's my point of power? That's what I get juiced about. So lastly, the fourth part of our definition of emotions is that feelings are not facts. Okay. Feelings are not facts. They are an interpretation on what is happening in our real world and in obviously the chemistry of our bodies. So when I say that they aren't fact, I don't mean that they're not real. Okay. Obviously, we're experiencing them. What that means is that just because I'm feeling something doesn't make it necessarily true. It doesn't make it necessarily fact. It feels real, but it's not true. It's one of my favorite things that I can tell myself. Like, for example, like I might feel scared or afraid, but it's actually like I'm actually safe, right? So it feels real, but it's not true. And so I was just actually thinking about this. Like, have you ever heard anybody say, like, I feel fat? Well, first of all, fat is not a feeling. And just because you feel fat may have no bearing on what your body fat constitution is, for example. Or you might have an experience and you go, God, that woman was so mean, right? That's your interpretation of the experience, but that actually may just be your predisposition to mean people because of your past, right? You're reliving that memory of the past of, oh my gosh, people are mean to me. As Danielle Laporte says, feelings are neither the facts of what actually happened, nor of a shared reality. They are indicators of your personal reality. Everything that we feel comes through our own particular lens of how we see the world, how we've experienced it up until this point, the associations we make with people, places, and things. Like, it's relative. It is subjective. Our feelings are subjective. And a great kind of demonstration of this is think about PTSD, for example. So someone who maybe was in war and had a really traumatic experience, they come back from war and something gets triggered. Maybe they hear a loud noise, maybe there's a firework, maybe there's a gunshot, and all of a sudden they're, and this is a whole study in trauma and what the brain does in trauma, but all of a sudden they're reliving that traumatic experience. Now, are they in war at the present time that they're experiencing that trauma all over again? No. I mean, they could be like sitting outside in a peaceful pasture. They could be at home watching TV, but the brain registers that as familiar, as the same, right? So it feels real, but it's not true. They're not facts. And so this is not to say that they don't matter. Obviously, this whole season is the fact that emotions matter, or that we should dismiss them because they're subjective or whatever. It's like, no, feelings are actually really important pieces of feedback that can help determine the quality of our lives. Like, they help us know when to say yes. Emotions help us know when to say no. They help us prioritize like what's important to us. And they help us move towards wholeness and away from disharmony within ourselves. They show us where we are out of balance, where they show us what needs attention inside of ourselves, what needs some deeper healing, what still might be raw or tender, what needs forgiveness, what needs compassion. They are, to me, beacons that bring us back to our truest self. They are these road signs of our soul's destination. But it's important that we remember that a lot is influencing those feelings. And once we begin to make sense of that for ourselves, it really does become so liberating, because all of a sudden we can go, oh, wait a second, I'm feeling something. And we can have this pause as Viktor Frankl talks about the pause between the stimulant and the response. That moment, that sacred pause where we go, okay, I'm feeling something, something's getting stirred up in me. Where is that coming from? How ancient is it? How old is it? What's familiar about this for me? Is this a trauma response? Is this something that's old that needs attention? Is this reactive? And all of a sudden, by upping our level of awareness that, okay, these emotions are not me, they're a vibration, they're a chemical response, they're neurologically hardwired in my brain. We have a little bit of distance so we can slow it down and go, wait a second, let me look at this. Let me be curious about it. Let me investigate. Let me bring in some tenderness. Let me bring in some loving. And we'll talk about ways to do this. Like I'm setting this up for future episodes, but sort of knowing what emotions are, knowing the biology, the physiology of what's actually happening inside of the body, to me, helps our emotional experience be a little less scary and more tangible, that can give you some permission to feel, because it is feedback. It is information. It's really helpful. And so throughout the course of these 8 weeks, we're going to have powerful conversations where you're going to get to experience this on a practical level and give yourself some more tools on, okay, when something does arise, when I do feel strongly about something, when I feel that hurt or that grief or that fear or anxiety or stress or overwhelm or whatever, what do I do with that? But the first piece of this is understanding, okay, now I know what emotions are. Emotions are ultimately residual chemical records of the past. It's not new. Emotions are vibrations in the body. Emotions are not your identity, and feelings are not facts. So we don't have to be afraid of them. We have the ability to move through them, to work through them. They don't have control over us, which is pretty cool. And so we get to have a say-so in our emotional experience and our emotional expression through life. So I hope that this was a, I don't know, maybe fascinating first episode, maybe intriguing, maybe like, woo, that was a lot. That was heavy. I don't know. Actually, let me know. Shoot me a DM on Instagram, Mary G. Hyatt. While you're there, give me a follow. Shoot me a text on my community number, which hopefully you've already heard and know that number. Shoot me a message through my website. Let me know how this is hitting, how this is landing. And we're going to continue this conversation over the next many, many months. And I have to say, I am so just thrilled to be back. It's really great to, even though I'm looking at a camera, it's great to be with you. It's great to hang out with you. And yes, we are going to be doing the work. We're in it. Let's go. And I'm sending you guys so much loving. And I will see you on the next episode. Bye, guys. Hey there. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to share it to your Instagram stories and tag me at Mary G. Hyatt. Or, of course, share it with a dear friend, sister, or colleague. I think we could all use a little more emotional awareness, don't you think? Plus, if you haven't already subscribed to the Living Fully Alive podcast, make sure to do that now so you don't miss out on any of my episodes or guided meditations. All right. Thanks, y'all, and see you next time.